Okay, and hello, welcome. This is Eileen Cook with the Creative Academy, and I'm very excited to have with me my good friend, and she's also my beta reader at times, so I appreciate that, Kelly Charron. So welcome, Kelly.
Hi, Eileen. So excited to be here. Thanks for
I know.
having me on.
Excited to have you. I wonder, just to start, if you can tell us a little bit about your books, because I think one thing that you did is very different, is you have two books that are related, but people don't necessarily need to read them together, which I find quite interesting.
Yeah, so I write psychological thrillers in young adult and adult, and I have published two. And yes, they complement each other. So they are part of a series, but you don't need to, like you said, you don't have to have read both. The reason that I did that was because I had written the first one, and it was considered a dark YA, but on the verge of being an adult book. So the themes are quite dark in there, even though the protagonist is a 15-year-old girl. She's a serial killer. It's not a
That's
spoiler.
kind of dark. Okay.
Kind of dark. Small town Colorado, dad's a detective, and she decides what a great way to, you know, fulfill my dark urges is to try to see how many people I can kill and get away with.
Yeah, we all have that urge.
Why not? So I had some interest from agents and a editor when I was at the Surrey International Writers Conference, and they had said I'd really like to see this book as an adult book. So I thought, I wasn't 100% sure how I felt about it, but thought, let's try. So I started to write it. About halfway through, I thought, you know what? No, I really love Ryan in her snarky, teen angsty way that she is in the original version. But I thought, what would this look like when she was an adult? So then I started to change that book, and I made it a sequel that takes place 12 years later. And so, yeah, I kind of like, because I give you enough backstory in the second book, you're able to read it as a standalone. And I also realized there's a lot of people out there who'd like to read adult, don't read YA or vice versa. So I thought, here's one book or kind of a storyline that you can read either.
Nice. So we wanted to talk about covers today.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious because you recently rebranded your two books and changed the cover. So I'm curious, with the original covers that you have, what did you like about them? And do you have it handy? Can you show us the original
I
cover?
do. So the original covers for both books, I chose to go on the darker, edgier side. The material in the book obviously is that way. There is some, dark humor in there, but I thought, so that's pretty wicked. So that was the first one. And that's
Nice. So
so
one thing is, those do really look like they go together. Like they look like they are a
yeah.
part of the same brand.
So that was good. I definitely wanted that. I, took my notes and thought, if you're going to do a series, you want to have, a similar feel, a similar look, have it a person who's, looking at it goes, oh, I know exactly what that's part of. So I wanted to capture that, which I think the books do. Where I came across some issues were the fact that some people were put off by how scary or dark or horror looking that they are. And they're not necessarily horror. The second book, Wicked Followed, is straight up psychological thriller. The first book, Pretty Wicked, is more on the thriller side. There is a big psychological aspect to it, though. So I think that people are thinking that it's just one thing when they see it, and that it's going to be, this, like the Saw movies, this terrorizing kind of thing. And it's not. I was hoping that doing, something gritty like that was going to do one or two things for me. I thought, this is either going to get attention and it's going to do well for me. People are going to be intrigued. The people who are like-minded like me that want to watch, Silence of the Lambs and Criminal Minds are going to be like, ooh, yes. And it did work for that. But I'm finding that population is probably a little bit smaller than I had hoped. I did quite a few book signings, and I could see people would look at it and they would come over, maybe ask me about it. And then they already had in their mind an idea that it wasn't for them. And then if I would explain what the book was about, then they would go, oh, okay. And then, be more likely to try it. But yeah, at first they're thinking it's just a slasher kind of thing, and it's really not. So I did decide, after about a year of thinking about it and chatting with you about it, and, thinking I want to rebrand it to go with future books I have coming out that are also psychological thrillers and be more aligned for them and what's out in the market right now. And what's in the market, I've noticed when I studied what's out there for thrillers right now, we're a little bit more benign. They're a little bit nicer. They might have flowers. They have water. They might have a silhouette of a girl, but she's not holding a knife. That's key. So
Key. Yeah.
So I thought, you know what? I want to go towards something that is maybe even beautiful and a little bit eerie. And that's when I came up with my friend Stina Holmes, the new covers.
Can you show us those new covers too?
Yeah. So Pretty Wicked.
These are brand new. Like they're just hitting out now, aren't they?
and wicked fallout.
And again, they definitely
A
look
little bit of blood on there. It's lovely. So
just
there's
a tiny bit though.
just a tiny bit of blood. The dandelion is it has a little bit of blood and a little bit of cast on that, which is nice. So yeah, and so far I've had, I think, more compliments on the cover since they have, I put them out on Instagram a little bit here and there and on Twitter, and people seem to really like them. And I'm having, I think, a little bit more room for people to want to try, at least to read the back of the book and see what it's about before they just go, ooh, not for me, So
Yeah, I do think, it's interesting because we certainly talked when you were picking your initial covers, and I loved them and I still do. I quite like that.
yeah,
And again,
I
we
do
both
too.
like investigative discovery on repeat. So that's probably not too surprising that they appeal to us. But, I actually started thinking when you were talking about rebranding, and I was like, well, if I saw that cover, would I necessarily be pulled in, or would I think slasher, which is not something that I typically am interested in. But your new covers, I think, definitely would potentially have that impact, particularly if I knew they're psychological thrillers. It's just that little bit of uncertainty, which I find interesting.
Yeah, it's just that idea of like, for this symbolism, I guess, behind it is we have like what was a beautiful dandelion that has now, gone through the process and is dying, and it's as it's shriveling and these little bits are blowing off. And I feel like that's really representative of like my crazy character. She looks like a really beautiful, pretty, blonde, sweet cheerleader, but you have no idea that she's maybe a little dead inside.
Because, that happens to all of us. So, I mean, the cliche is that you should never judge a book by its cover, but of course we all do. So you talked about researching covers, and I think that's kind of interesting. So, like, did you find yourself, like, did you just go online and start like looking at like, what are the books I like, or how did you go about kind of looking at covers?
So I looked at Google Images, and I typed in like psychological thrillers. I typed in for the last few years. I looked through Goodreads. I looked at some thriller and psychological thriller authors that I really like, and looked to see their websites, like what their covers looked like, how the series, kind of looked, and how they were designed. And I thought, okay, yes. So something, I was seeing a pattern. There was a lot that had like flowers on them, and a lot that had, maybe like tall grass or trees or something like that. And I thought, I want something that's going to stand out a little bit more, that's not necessarily done all the time, but is going to have a similar feel of like, we don't know. So I found there was two things that were out there. It was either what I just stated with like nature, or it was like the silhouette, kind of like The Silent Wife, or there's a few others where you see like, or part of them looking through a window, but like just part of a face. So those seem to be the two big ones. And because I did have silhouettes on the first rendition of the books, I wanted to step away from that. I didn't want to kind of do that again. So I thought, go the opposite direction and see.
And I think what's really important is, of course, you're an indie author, and so you have the beauty of the ultimate control of what your covers look like, which is one of the huge benefits of being an indie author. But I'm going to put a plug in that if people are traditionally published, I think there's this tendency, and I have fallen prey to it, where you just have faith and trust that somehow the book publishing people know what's best. And I think it's well worth your while to do the exact same process that you just talked about, Kelly. Like going to the bookstores, figuring out what appeals to you, why it appeals to you, what else is happening in that market. And I think you're trying to find that sweet spot, which isn't easy, of something that looks like it fits with the brand, because people are doing that thing like, I know I liked this, so I want something like that.
Yeah.
But not so much the same that it's like, maybe I already read that. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a bit of a tough decision. Like I said, I went back and forth doing it because I had, some success with the first book. And, if you Google it, there's quite a few interviews and quite a few blogs and things that are featuring it. So I thought, our reader's going to get confused. They're going to be like, this is the same title, but is it not the same book? So I did. And plus, time and money spent on getting books printed and getting, things to hand out and signage and things like that. So I thought, it's not serving me overall. I think I just need to make the leap and do it. And readers are smart and they'll figure it out. And, I have on a lot of things like on Goodreads and Amazon. I think it's great because they'll show previous editions. So just like when the big five or traditional publishers will put out new covers for books, or there'll be a different cover for the UK as there would be in US and Canada. So I figured it's not going to be the end of the world if you see more than one cover for. Maybe it gives, people the opportunity to have, which one they like best. So
And I think that's an interesting way to engage readers is by doing, and I've seen people do it like contests or that kind of thing, because oftentimes, same as you, people have copies with the older version. But certainly it's this thing that, I think we think again that, a big publisher is always going to get it right, and they don't. And that's often why I think you're seeing publishers, they'll do different covers for the paperback version as compared to what they did for the hardcover. And I think sometimes that's because they want to shake it up, but sometimes I think it's just, they're like, we didn't quite get that right. And they want to change it up.
I'm trying to think now about if I have ever seen a paperback with the same cover. I don't think it's as often. I think you're right. I think they do try to shake it up a bit more and see, will this do better? And
will it maybe pull in a different reader? So it's interesting for me. My book with Malice has the exact same cover that it did on hardcover. But what's interesting is The Hanging Girl, which came out in hardcover last year, they're choosing a new cover for the paperback release. And in fact, they're choosing a new title, which is also kind of unusual. And it has to do with exactly what you're talking about. They felt that the initial brand was maybe a bit darker than the story reflects, and we're losing readers for that reason.
It makes sense. There's another one. I just actually watched a small podcast this morning from Christy Stratos, who talks about, she had to just do the same thing. She's an indie published author, but she changed her title to her book. She said that because her original title was so popular that she was getting lost in the search history. So when people would try to find her, they couldn't, because there were so many pages of this other book. And it was a struggle for her to get any traction whatsoever. So she changed it to something that was totally unique so that it will stand out among everything. So I think, that's another thing to look at when you're picking title. It could sometimes be just as important as what the cover looks like in a way.
So that's, like, you just did a perfect transition for me. I wondered if we could give people who are listening some cover don'ts, or anything that you noticed when, and don't mention anyone in particular, because that just wouldn't be nice, but things that you might have seen when you were looking at covers, and I'll chime in as well. But like you just mentioned, the idea of, I think sometimes people pick a title that might be too similar or like so common. So you're making it harder for readers to find you in terms of visibility and where you might show up in rankings. So if you're Stephen King and you pick, a certain title, like, you're going to pop right at number one, but for a new indie author, maybe not.
Exactly. So one thing I think is super important when you're going to design a cover, especially as an indie, when it's all in your control, is the image that you choose and the font that you choose. That can make or break what looks professional to people. People have a keen eye, and they look at something, they can tell if you don't have any experience and did try Photoshop for the first time in your basement, or if you paid a designer who knows what they're doing, who can use light, color, shadows, and something really interesting, and do something for the cover that way. Because you can take a normal image and manipulate it, maybe bring it in closer on something, so there's close up, or move it far away and fade it out a bit, or make it blurry, just to get like an atmospheric kind of effect. So I think really having someone that knows what they're doing is going to be key, and having a title and a font, because I have seen some that even have a pretty decent background, and then the font just looks like, I don't know, like you chose something to print out for your kindergarten class and put it on a poster. Like, it's just not classic, or it doesn't draw you in. It's not,
Never use Comic Sans for your book title.
Never use Comic Sans. I was thinking that too and didn't say it. You are right.
Let's just there's some advice someone can write down on their paper right now. Do not use Comic Sans for your book title.
And if you're doing a series, that font should go across all the books, whether it be the same font for your name and then the same font style for your title, because I think that just, again, links those books.
And that might mean, kind of thinking ahead, like if you're thinking you're going to write a series, when you're choosing images, think about, is this something that, can kind of go across multiple books? And kind of have a similar brand. And for people who are members of the Creative Academy, Crystal has some wonderful workshops on branding, and well worth a listen to, particularly if you're the kind of person, and I'm the first to admit, like, I can tell when I like a cover, but I don't know if I could always tell you why I like it or why I don't like it. But there is, it is a skill set. And if it's not yours, it's probably worth investing in, because there is kind of nothing more sad. I recently saw a book, which, again, I'm not going to mention the title, but it was being shared on Facebook, and it may be a great book. I have no idea, but the cover is actually hand drawn.
Yeah.
And I'm quite sure whoever drew it got like an A in high school art. it's not like I drew it. Let's just be clear. It's not like stick figures. But it looks amateur art, and it's, you know, in colored pencils. Like, it's just not going to pop, and it's going to make me think as a reader, again, like didn't even go online to look at the book other than thinking like, oh, big mistake.
This is the packaging that you're selling your product. What does your product look like? Like, that's the natural kind of thing that we go to. If you didn't put the time to wrap it nicely, then maybe the present inside isn't so good. Yeah. I think that's a natural thing for all of us to kind of assume. And again, I won't find out if I'm wrong because I just can't bring myself to, sorry to say it, but spend the money on something that I feel like just isn't thought out and attractive.
Well, I mean, I think it's the same thing, like using an analogy like food. So, you know, if you go to someplace and someone has really plated something carefully and, you know, it's got the little sprig of parsley or foam or, you know what I mean? Like, there are places you go where they doctor it and it looks amazing. And then if somebody plops something on a plate and it looks hideous and they're like, try it tastes really good. And you're like, no, like,
I was thinking that growing up, I had a friend whose friend's mother was like, I have some of this. There was some mold on it, but I cut it off and it's still delicious. And it's like, that's like not the selling feature. You're like, try it. No, I'm not going to try it. Thanks so much though.
I grew up in the Midwest, which is the land of casseroles. So like everything had crushed potato chips on top, and that doesn't make it better. Like, and sometimes they would actually taste amazing, but they looked horrid. And yeah, I think the issue is there is so much product in the market, and people are going online and they're looking through, and you have to make sure that your product looks as professional as possible, because if you do it right, most readers, they don't know if you're indie published or traditional published.
Yeah, I actually, on Goodreads, there are quite a few people. And for those that really did like the first covers, and I thank you. But some of them were like, I really love this cover, and I hope, you know, her publisher did a great job, and I hope that they never change it. And I thought, oh, sorry for the 5 of you. But, you know, there are other people who really like the new covers too. But yeah, if you do a good job and you hire the right people who know what they're doing, then often, you can, what I say, you can pass right in there.
Just go in there. And that's actually a good piece of advice too, is thinking for people, if you're designing a cover, like shrink that bugger down and take a look at it as a tiny thumbnail.
Yes.
Because don't assume people are always going to click and get the full size cover. So again, sometimes I've seen covers where it's just either such a busy image or such a, like, something happened when it shrunk down and I can't even tell necessarily what it is. And again, that's all I need to then pass by and pick something else.
It's a great point when most of us are shopping on our phones now.
Yeah.
We're getting thumbnails. We're not getting anything bigger than that. So yeah.
So thinking of that is a good one. How did you go about picking a cover designer?
I went through a referral for the first covers, and she was a wonderful designer out of the UK. And we worked quite well together, and she was really fast. And so that was great. And for the other one, I actually was just chatting with a friend of mine, and she happens to like to make her own covers and play with things on the side. And she was like, let me play. Let me try. Let me see what I come up with. I have some ideas. She sent me some images. I sent her some images. We sat down together one night and looked through them together, found these. And I thought, yes, do something with that. And then hours later, it was in my inbox, and it was great. I was like, that's it. Great. It was the easiest process ever.
But you've had to tell people before, like, no, that's not it.
Oh, yes.
And I think that's important for people listening, that, and maybe I'm deferring and thinking, you know, putting it into head, but I think sometimes women in particular, we want to make people like, we really appreciate they put so much work into it, and maybe I don't really know what's right. And so we sometimes say yes to something when it's not quite what we want.
So people have incredible instincts, and you feel that little niggle in your stomach when you know it's not the right thing, or that's not for you, or it's just something. So I wait for that feeling of like, I get that actual feeling of elation, and I'm like, that's it. Like, and I know, and until I have that, I'm just not going to settle. So I did have to send a few back with the first, with the UK designer, and it wasn't any of her fault. Like we were trying a few different things. We'd never worked together before. So I ended up finding the image myself and sending it to her and saying, can you do something with this? And then I got the original cover that went out. So that was good. But yeah, she had done a few things that, and I think I showed you them early on, and we were like, that's just not, like, they really showed clearly a girl that she chose. And I was like, that's not what my character looks like. Ryan doesn't look like that. And I couldn't get past it. And I thought, oh, no. Like, I'd rather have a silhouette. Because then also anybody can imagine what she looks like. I wasn't crazy about having a face right on there that people would associate with her. So
So I think that is my big takeaway from our talk is people, you got to do your homework. So, set yourself up with a Pinterest board or however you want to collect those images or take pictures with your camera, head down to your local Indigo or Barnes & Noble and take pictures of what works for you. But start looking for those trends and what's calling out to you and pick a cover that you love. And if you
see it and you're like, I would want that. I want it. You'll know.
Yeah, if you don't want your own book, that's not a good sign. Not a good sign. And if you're someone who's working with a traditional publisher, also don't be afraid to speak up. Like talk about what you're liking, what you're not liking. Be willing again to do that work and don't assume that someone's going to know better than you, because quite often in a traditional publisher, the person designing the cover has never read the book. They get what's called a one sheet that just tells them a brief summary of the book in terms of tone and feel and particular things about the character. So if the main character, for example, is Black, so that they know to pick, if they're having a cover model, that the cover model is in fact Black. But you've even been examples where they've gotten that wrong, like, and those tend to make big splashes on social media. But
the character has red hair and you made her a blonde, like something that's just like you didn't check.
You didn't even do the most basic checks. And then I'm always wondering, did the author try and speak up about that? Because I sometimes wonder. So
and you're your own best advocate, right? So we have to do that.
Everybody, it's your career. So show us your shiny new covers one more time.
Oh, thank you.
So if people are looking for a good psychological thriller, I can recommend them. I actually have read both of them. It's Pretty Wicked and Wicked Fallout. And those are available online at all the major retailers.
They are.
Yay. Well, thank you so much, Kelly Charron.
I had so much fun, Eileen, always.
All right. Thanks to everybody else who is listening, and we'll see you around the Academy.
Are you a member yet? Join us today and unlock a wealth of resources, masterclasses, feedback opportunities, and community events designed to help you reach the next step in your writing journey. No matter what stage you're at, we've got a helping hand to guide you along the way. Check out our free resource room if you'd like to get a taste of how we can help you reach your writing and publishing goals. Thanks for bringing us along on your writing and publishing journey. Donna, Crystal, and I hope we'll see you around the Creative Academy soon.